So today's sermon contains love and football and ancient Greek, but mostly love. In fact, I'll start with the football, in part to get that out of the way. We've already referenced a little today, and you may have noticed from the news or the commercials or the general zeitgeist that football is a week away today. The football, the game, the Super Bowl. I have a lot of concerns. I'm a fan of football, and I have a lot of concerns about football. The safety of it, the various oppressive qualities, some of the toxic masculinity, just to name a few things. The fact that we, the taxpayers, seem to foot the bill for a lot of billionaires' new buildings. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I do watch the Super Bowl each year, despite my misgivings. If nothing else, the commercials are really great, right? Usually the halftime performances are pretty good. I thought for a moment the Ravens might be in this thing, but alas. I remember a service I went to at my home church now many years ago. It was a question box sermon. These are popular in some Unitarian Universalist congregations. I'm going to do one actually later this spring. That is one in which the minister takes questions and answers them, or attempts to answer them anyway. It's a really interesting way to see what people are thinking about, how the Spirit can move through questions and hopefully into my answers. So in that service years ago that was about this, I remember vividly the last question, because it happened to be on Super Bowl Sunday in February, much like next Sunday will be. And the question was this: who will win the Super Bowl today? Which usually these questions are not so predictive in quality. Anyway, my minister then, the Reverend Eric Posa, he ducked the question very wisely, didn't give a real answer. I don't remember what he did say, but I know he didn't pick a team. I also don't know who will win next week. Even the experts on these things are wrong almost 50% of the time. So, predictions are worth what you pay for them, I suppose. I have a very different message for you, though, than the one you'll hear leading up to the Super Bowl and the one you're likely to hear the rest of this month on TV and other media, because we've already been talking today about Valentine's a little bit. This month you will probably have probably already heard a lot about love. Little cupids will sing at you or shoot arrows at you, and chocolate is already everywhere, even more so than usual. There's red and pink and hearts, and you get the point. Valentine's Day, which has been almost completely successfully removed from its original story, which is one about protest and marriage in the face of government bans against it, which seems a lot more timely for our time than something about what Valentine's Day seems to be today. Instead, Valentine's Day has been made into this very commercial holiday, of course, in which you're supposed to buy something for someone you love. You're made to feel bad if you don't have someone to be with. Maybe you get the point there too. But today, I want to talk only a little bit about the kind of love we usually hear around Valentine's Day. My talk about love doesn't involve flying babies or chocolates. At least they're not required for it. So when we talk about love, I think that we have a problem in English, which is a funny one to me. For a language that has so very many words, English has a lot more words than most languages, like several times as many words as a lot of languages. Anyway, for a language with so many words, we don't do a very good job describing different kinds of love, even though we have a lot of words for it. I looked up my thesaurus. I did it online, actually, now. I'm not sure I own a physical thesaurus anymore. And these were the words that it came up with for love. I'm going to go really quick. Affection, appreciation, devotion, fondness, friendship, infatuation, lust, passion, respect, tenderness, yearning, adulation, allegiance, amity, amorousness, Amour, ardor, attachment, case, I don't know what that means. Cherishing, crush, delight, devotedness, enchantment, enjoyment, fervor, fidelity, flame, hankering, idolatry, inclination, like, partiality, piety, rapture, regard, relish, sentiment, weakness, worship, zeal, ardency, mad for, and soft spot. For, presumably, not an actual soft spot. We could probably name a few more if we really tried. And of course, none of those is perfect. Some of them seem more love adjacent than love to me, but all of them catch something of the sense of love. The words we have in English are both numerous and it seems somehow inadequate to me too. And so I turn, as I don't often do, but I will today, to ancient Greek, because ancient Greek is actually really great at this. I can still kind of read Greek. I took biblical Greek in seminary, the Koine, which was the common Greek of the larger Mediterranean era in the first couple centuries CE. I studied it in seminary. I can read with a little trouble, but anyway. The Greeks were really great about this thing, though. They spoke of the one word that we usually say, love, in at least 4 different ways. Actually, a lot more than 4, but 4 I want to talk about today. There was eros, where we get the word erotic, and eros means something like romantic love, which is kind of the stuff Hallmark and the candy stores and you name it are pushing in our face this month. There's philia, and so close to Philadelphia, I don't have to tell you all too much about this, but philia really means love in an intellectual sense, not necessarily emotional, but in the sense of having loyalty and respect for another. Philadelphia is famously the city of brotherly love. It has not always been my experience that that's how Philadelphians actually are. To go back to football for a second, the sports fan of that town have a certain reputation, and it's not for being the friendliest people on the planet. Anyway, the word is often translated as brotherly, but that's not actually a great translation of it. Loyal love or respectful love might be a little better. The Greeks had a word called storge, which you almost never hear, but this is affectional or instinctual love. Another way to think of it might be as familial love, the sense of love that one often, though not always, feels towards a child or a parent or another family member. It has a self-sacrificing sense to it, that this is a love that might not entirely be a choice. It might not always be mutual, but it is deep and real nonetheless. And then my favorite word the Greeks use is agape, which you have here. We have a fund called the Agape Fund. This means love in a very deep spiritual sense. It's a love that's selfless, that gives and expects nothing in return. It comes from all of us and holds all of us. It's not merely a personal thing, but something that all of us have. Agape is the word Jesus uses. Okay, he actually spoke Aramaic, but the word that is translated for him to use mostly in the New Testament. It's the word that is used when he says to love your neighbor. He doesn't mean romantic love for your neighbor. He doesn't mean the sort of bond of love that philia means. It's more than those, or rather something different than those. I think English fails us in this respect, but charitable love comes close. Perhaps the story of the Good Samaritan, in which Jesus asks who is truly the neighbor of an injured man, gives us more insight to this. It is, the story implies, the person who helps him despite being a total stranger. Jesus says, love your neighbor, and he gives the example of a stranger who helps someone hurt along the roadside as an example. It's not a love that's emotional. It's not intellectual. It rather speaks to a spiritual form of love. It's love that recognizes one's own humanity in another, even though they may not seem like yourself. It's a powerful love, something that takes hold of the Good Samaritan and moves him to act for the better. It is, though, and this is something I think about a lot, hard to love your neighbor if you don't love yourself in Jesus' formula. Frederick Buechner, the writer, says we might think of what it would be like to love ourselves as we love our neighbor, flipping the relationship. Now, I wave at most of my neighbors. I know a few of them better than that, but most of them I just sort of wave, say hi, and that's about the extent of our relationship. We have lived in places during my family's time together, where things were different, where we knew a lot of our neighbors much better. Not always better in a pleasant way. There were some rough relationships. But the tough thing about love is that it is irresistible, and yet we still try to resist it. It's easy to think of our own selves as unlovable. I love to share this article. It's from a satirical publication you might know of called The Onion. I'm going to read just the first paragraph to you. It's one of my very favorite things I've ever read. The headline is, "Report. Today the day they find out you're a fraud." Washington. While experts agree you've been remarkably successful so far at keeping up the ruse that you're a capable, worthwhile individual, a new report out this week indicates that today is the day they finally figure out you're a complete and utter fraud. I just love this because I've felt that way. Maybe you have too. That I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing on this day, and that someone is going to figure this out and call me out on it. I saw a cartoon too recently. Do you know what imposter syndrome is? The idea that you're not good enough for whatever you're supposed to be doing. The cartoon took it a step further even and said, "Are you really good enough to feel imposter syndrome?" Which I saw this, and I laughed so loud that Kristen came running into the room to see what was going on. I feel like these things are speaking right to me on certain days. But my friends, when I shared this on social media, disagreed with me instantly because they said, no, it was talking about them. And I go back to Buechner's point. How can we possibly love each other if we struggle even to love ourselves? I don't have any easy answers. I so rarely do in these sermons, I'm sorry. I don't have any easy answers, I'm afraid, but I hope that's why we're here in worship today and in this place and in this community, to find something that speaks to our deepest souls and moves us. That in community with the people all around us, we can learn to love and to be loved. The Unitarian theologian and ethicist James Luther Adams, who I quote frequently, said that church is the place where we come to practice what it means to be human. And I love that because you don't have to get it right. He said it's the place where you get to practice and maybe get a little better. And maybe practice in the sense of a spiritual practice where it's the thing you do and do and do and do and do and do over and over and over again, and hopefully get a little better at it. I hope that places like this are where we can find that sense of agape, of a love that embraces all of us, that comes from us and flows through us, and can hold us in tough times. I hope that what we hear here from me, hopefully, but more so from one another, is a small part of holding this love up in our lives every week. And I hope you're here next week when we explore this further. So I close by saying that you are loved, you have love to give, and never forget those two things. May it be so forever.